Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond. If you're someone who finds comfort, strength, or meaning in heartfelt stories that reflect the quiet struggles and powerful turns of life, you're in the right place. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing so we can continue bringing you more stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. It had only been one night. One night filled with celebration, laughter, rituals, and promises, most of them spoken not with words, but through the solemn exchange of glances and gentle touches. Amina sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the soft gold bangles from the wedding, their soft clink now a mocking echo in the silence of the room. Her husband, Horace, was leaving for another country. She had known it. Everyone had. It was not hidden from her, yet the ache of that knowledge had waited until now, until the moment he stood in the doorway with his travel bag, barely zipped, checking his watch more than he looked at her. "I'll be back before you know it," he had said, not unkindly, but too casually. His smile had been polite, distant. The same smile he gave to neighbors or a taxi driver. He gave her a brief hug, the kind you give someone you barely know well enough to say goodbye to. And just like that, he was gone. The front door closed. A car engine started. And the silence inside the house thickened like smoke. Amina sat for a long time, numb. She looked around at the unfamiliar furniture of this new house, his house, not yet hers. She had dreamed of marriage as a beginning of companionship, of laughter in the kitchen, shared breakfasts, evening walks. But here she was, married in name and left behind in truth. No promises kept, no intimacy shared. Just the sharp sound of a suitcase rolling away from her heart. She hadn't even unpacked. That afternoon, a young man arrived. Barely in his 20s, with gentle eyes and a quiet way of moving. He introduced himself as Zion. "I was instructed to help you with the house," he said simply, not meeting her eyes, respectful to the edge of nervousness. "Mr. Horace said I should stay and assist with anything you need." Amina didn't know how to respond. Her husband hadn't mentioned this. But then again, there were many things he hadn't said. She nodded mechanically and showed Zion the small servant's room near the kitchen. Days passed slowly. The house echoed with absence. Zion kept to himself, cleaning, cooking, occasionally stepping out for groceries. He never overstepped, never initiated conversation. But in his silence, there was something kind. Something steady. A presence that, though quiet, began to soothe the sharpness of Amina's solitude. One morning, Amina walked into the kitchen to find breakfast ready. 2 cups of chai sat on the table. Zion stood back, hands behind him. "You hadn't eaten yesterday," he said gently. "I thought you might today." She looked at the cup, steam curling toward the ceiling. "Thank you," she whispered, surprised by the lump in her throat. They sat in silence, sipping slowly. The tea was warm. So was the silence. Each day brought more of these small gestures. Amina found the garden tended. Her favorite fruit bought without asking. A book placed near her reading chair, just the one she had mentioned once in passing. It was strange how this stranger knew more about caring than the man who had promised to be her partner for life. And yet, there was no dishonor in it. No boundaries crossed. Just the quiet healing of presence. Amina found herself waking with purpose, not because of anything grand, but because someone, even if only one person, cared enough to make the house feel a little less like a cage. But the ache remained. Not for Horace, but for what she had believed marriage would be. Still, in the corners of her days, something new began to bloom, faint as a whisper, but present. It was the beginning of something she couldn't name yet. Not love. Not longing. Just a gentle reminder that being seen, even in silence, can be the beginning of a different kind of hope. The days began to stretch, long and quiet, like endless threads pulling Amina further into her thoughts. The mornings were the hardest. She would wake up to the sharp emptiness of the bed, the cold side of the mattress never once disturbed. The silence of the house settled on her shoulders like an invisible weight. There was no laughter, no phone calls, not even a message from Horace. It had been over a week, and aside from a brief voice note saying he had landed safely, there had been nothing. No questions about how she was adjusting. No reassurance. No sign of emotional presence. He was simply gone. Zion continued his duties with quiet dedication. He would rise early, sweep the front porch, water the plants, and prepare simple meals. But he had stopped knocking on her door, perhaps sensing her need for space. Still, she noticed the care he put into small things. Her favorite tea now always appeared with breakfast. A vase of fresh jasmine placed discreetly in the hallway. The curtains drawn open in the morning, closed again before sunset. One evening, Amina sat in the courtyard, watching the sky turn orange and purple. The house behind her glowed faintly with soft lights, casting warm shadows across the marble floor. Zion stepped out quietly, a book in hand. "I found this while cleaning the study," he said softly, offering the book to her. "It looked like something you might enjoy." Amina took it and glanced at the cover. It was a novel she had mentioned during a fleeting conversation a few days earlier. She looked at him, surprised by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave a small nod and turned to leave, but she stopped him. "Zion, would you sit with me? Just for a while?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure. Then he quietly took a seat on the opposite bench, a respectful distance away. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It felt like something shared. "Do you miss home?" she asked suddenly. Zion looked up at the sky. "Yes. Every day. But work keeps me focused." Amina nodded slowly. "You're lucky you can say that. I don't even know what I'm supposed to focus on anymore." There was a long pause before Zion replied. "Maybe, focus on healing. Even if you don't know from what." The words caught her off guard. She looked at him more carefully then, not just as a servant or someone her husband had arranged to stay, but as a person with depth, with quiet wisdom, and perhaps his own kind of heartbreak. That night, Amina read the first chapter of the book he gave her. It brought a strange sense of comfort, like a companion she hadn't realized she needed. She slept with the book resting on her chest, and for the first time since Horace had left, her dreams were not filled with questions. They were filled with silence, but not the kind that hurts. The kind that heals. And somewhere in that silence, something small began to grow. Something that didn't yet have a name. But it was real. The rain had started sometime in the late afternoon, a gentle drizzle at first, then turning into a steady rhythm against the windows. Amina stood by the kitchen sink, staring out at the wet garden. The small lemon tree trembled under the weight of the drops, its leaves glossy and dark. The sky was low and gray, pressing everything down into a hush. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. The silence didn't ache anymore, it had settled into something familiar, like an old sweater. Still, there were moments it became too much, moments when her heart reached out for something, anything, to hold on to. She turned from the window and noticed a soft light coming from the living room. Curious, she walked in to find Zion kneeling by the fireplace, carefully stacking kindling. He didn't see her at first. There was something peaceful about the way he moved, focused, gentle, deliberate. She watched for a moment before clearing her throat. He looked up quickly, startled. "I'm sorry. I thought the house might feel warmer with the fire." "No need to apologize," she said quietly. "It's thoughtful." A few minutes later, the flames had taken hold, crackling softly. Amina sat on the floor across from Zion, the fire between them casting flickering shadows on the walls. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, feeling the warmth slowly reach her skin. "It's beautiful," she murmured, more to herself than him. He nodded. "Rain makes everything feel closer. Like the world's holding its breath." She looked at him then, surprised by the poetry of his words. "Do you always think like that?" Zion smiled, a small, shy thing. "Not always. Only when I feel safe." There was a long pause. The fire hissed. A log shifted with a small pop. Amina lowered her gaze. "I don't feel safe. Not with the world. Not with myself." Zion didn't speak immediately. Then, gently, he said, maybe feeling safe doesn't mean nothing bad ever happens. Maybe it just means knowing someone is there when it does. The simplicity of his words struck her like thunder. Her throat tightened. She didn't know why this moment, of all moments, felt like a crack in the wall she had built so carefully around her heart. Perhaps it was the firelight, the rain, or simply the way he spoke, without judgment, without expectation. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. Zion didn't move closer. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat quietly, letting her cry, letting her be. And in that silence, Amina finally allowed herself to feel everything she had pushed away, the pain of abandonment, the fear of loneliness, the guilt of not being able to force herself to feel loved by a man who had left her like a forgotten suitcase. When she finally looked up, Zion was still there. Still watching the fire. Still present. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For not filling the silence." He smiled again, and in that firelit space between them, something unspoken passed. Not love, not yet. But understanding. A seed planted. The rain continued outside, steady and sure, washing the world clean. And inside, something began to soften. The morning light crept gently across the tiled floor, spilling through the sheer curtains like a quiet invitation. Amina sat at the small desk in the study, flipping through a drawer filled with old receipts, and used keys, and forgotten bits of her husband's life. She wasn't searching for anything in particular. Perhaps she only wanted to feel like she was moving forward, even if just through dust and memories. Her fingers paused when they touched a cream-colored envelope, sealed but unmarked. She turned it over, curious. It was thick, like a letter written with intention. There was no name on the front. Slowly, she peeled the flap open and pulled out a folded page, the edges yellowing just slightly with time. The handwriting was unmistakably Horace's. She hesitated before reading, her heart already beginning to thump with a mix of dread and anticipation. Then she began. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't find the courage to say what I needed to before I left. Maybe I thought this letter would hurt less than the truth spoken aloud. Maybe I was a coward. I don't know. Amina, I married you not because I was ready, but because I was expected to. Everyone said it was time. You were kind. Beautiful. Everything a man should want. But my heart, it wasn't ready for any of this. I was still trying to prove something to myself, chasing success in another land, thinking that I could build a future without being fully present in it. When I left, I didn't just abandon you. I abandoned honesty. I'm sorry. Zion is not just a servant. He's someone I trust deeply. Someone who has known more struggle than most people our age ever will. I asked him to stay not just to take care of the house, but to take care of you, in ways I didn't know how to. I don't know if that was right. I don't know if I had the right to make that decision. But I hoped. I hoped that maybe, if nothing else, he would help you feel less alone. I'm not coming back, Amina. I've accepted a job here that will keep me overseas for years. Maybe forever. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I just hope you find peace. In whatever form it chooses to arrive. The letter ended there. Amina sat frozen, the words echoing through her like a bell rung too close to the chest. There was no anger. Only a strange, hollow quiet. He had walked away from their marriage, not in a moment, but over time. Quietly, carelessly. But for the first time, she saw it clearly, not as a personal failure, but as a truth she was now free to hold without shame. She folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Her hands didn't tremble. She stood and walked out to the garden, where Zion was pruning a small rose bush. He looked up, surprised to see her outside this early. She didn't speak at first. Just watched him, watched the way his hands moved gently over the petals, careful not to damage them. So much care for something so easily broken. I read a letter, she said softly. He paused, unsure what she meant. It was from him. He's not coming back. Zion said nothing, only nodded slowly, the way someone does when they understand more than they let on. I'm not angry, she continued. Just free. I didn't know I could feel that. Zion lowered the shears and met her gaze. There was no pity in his eyes. Just quiet strength. You're allowed to choose now, he said. Not out of pain, but out of truth. And in that moment, Amina realized something she hadn't before. Her life was no longer waiting for someone to return. It was no longer paused. It was hers. Fully, finally, hers. The afternoon sun filtered in through the windows, painting long golden stripes across the living room floor. The quiet in the house no longer felt hollow. It felt settled, like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. Amina stood in the kitchen, slicing fresh vegetables while the aroma of simmering spices filled the air. There was a softness in her movements now, no longer rushed or restless. The kind of calm that comes when the soul finally finds a place to rest. Zion was in the garden, tying back the tomato vines that had begun to lean with their ripening fruit. He worked with focus and gentle hands, just as he always had, but there was something different about the air between them these days. It was no longer heavy with distance. There was something warm in the silence they now shared. Something honest. Amina carried 2 cups of tea out onto the veranda and placed one beside him on the low stone wall. He looked up with a grateful smile and took it, brushing the dirt from his hands. You've been working all morning, she said, sitting down beside him. So have you, he replied with a soft chuckle, gesturing toward the kitchen window. They sat in comfortable quiet for a while, watching the breeze stir the leaves. A butterfly hovered over the basil plant before drifting away. Amina turned to him. You've stayed in this house for almost a year. You've given it more life than I ever expected it to hold. More than I ever gave it credit for. He glanced at her, not quite sure where the conversation was going. I used to feel like this house belonged to someone else, she continued. Like I was just filling space that wasn't mine. But now, it feels different. And that has a lot to do with you. Zion's eyes lowered, humbled by her words. I only did what I was asked to do. No, she said quietly. You did more than that. You saw me. Not as someone to pity or protect, but as someone who was just lost. And you never once crossed a line. Not even when I broke down in front of you. Not even when I had nothing left to offer. Her voice wavered, not with sadness, but with gratitude. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. There was a long pause before he spoke. I stayed because I couldn't bear to see you fade into silence. I've seen silence destroy people. I've seen it break women who had no one left to listen. I didn't want that for you. Amina felt her heart rise in her chest like a tide. Then why didn't you ever say anything more? Come closer? He smiled faintly. Because I wasn't here for love, Amina. I was here to be present. If love came, it had to come from both of us. When it was ready. When you were ready. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from heartbreak this time, but from the beauty of being understood so deeply. She reached for his hand, slowly, deliberately, and he didn't pull away. Their fingers laced together like it was always meant to be that way. Weeks passed, and the world around them changed in subtle, wonderful ways. Amina began painting again, a passion she had buried long ago. Zion enrolled in a night class to finish a degree he'd once abandoned to work. They shared meals not as routine, but as moments of laughter and story. The home, once a hollow shell of broken promises, now rang with quiet music, the clinking of spoons, and the rhythm of new beginnings. One evening, while they were cleaning up after dinner, Amina placed a small box on the kitchen counter. Zion looked at her curiously. Open it, she said. Inside was a silver ring. Simple, unadorned. But beautiful. I don't know what the future looks like, she said softly. But I know it's not meant to be walked alone. Not anymore. Zion's eyes shimmered. Are you sure? She nodded. Not because I need to be saved. Not because I'm broken. But because I choose you. Freely. Fully. He took her hand in both of his, and in the stillness of the kitchen, without ceremony or spectacle, their hearts met in a quiet promise. It wasn't a story of scandal or betrayal. It wasn't about forbidden love or shame. It was about healing. About two souls who found each other not in desperation, but in patience, presence, and deep, human kindness. And so, what began as abandonment turned into belonging. What started in silence bloomed into love. Not all stories are loud. Some of them whisper. And those whispers change lives. Thank you for watching Storytelling and Beyond. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you emotional, meaningful, and inspiring stories from around the world. Until next time, take care and keep believing in the quiet power of compassion.